Good evening. This evening's special meeting will come to order. The City Council will convene on Tuesday, December 6th at 7 p.m. to hold a regular meeting at 7 p.m. for the purpose of discussing any and all business via in-person and remote participation in accordance with Chapters 40A of the Massachusetts General Laws and Sections 20A, B, and C of the Acts of 2021, signed into law by Governor Baker on June 16th, 2021. Alternative public access to this meeting shall be provided in the following manner. 1, this meeting is being televised via Peabody Access Television on Cable Channel 9. 2, real-time public comment during this public hearing can be addressed to the Peabody City Council using the Zoom virtual meeting software for remote access. Users may view the meeting and make a comment or question to the chair via the audio option. Please visit www.peabody-ma.gov for Zoom information. This meeting is being taped by the Peabody Access Television and is also being recorded by the City Council stenographer. The clerk's going to read the public notice. The clerk will read the public notice. The mayor and his team will give their presentation. We'll open it up to the public, and then we'll open it up to councilors, just so everybody has an idea of the flow. The clerk will read the public notice.
Notice is hereby given that the City Council of the City of Peabody will conduct a public hearing on Tuesday evening, December 6, 2022, at 7 p.m. in the Frank L. Wigan Auditorium, City Hall, 24 Lowell Street, Peabody, Mass., and remotely via Zoom in accordance with Chapter 797 of the Acts of 1979 as amended of the Massachusetts General Laws in order to adopt the percentages of the local tax levy to be borne by each class of real and personal property for fiscal year 2023. For remote participation using the Zoom platform, please visit www.peabody-ma.gov under City Calendar on the homepage or contact the City Clerk's office. Zoom information will not be available until the Friday before the meeting. Peabody City Council, Councilor Ryan Melville, City Council President.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor?
Good evening, Mr. President. Good evening, councilors. Hope everybody's doing well. I'm pleased to be here tonight to discuss the state of our city's finances. This is a very challenging time of year for our financial team, and I want to deeply thank Mike Gingras, Mary Martin, Sue Antonellis, Leslie George, and their office staff for their hard work in preparing for tonight's presentation. Mike will provide a more detailed presentation to you. However, I did want to give you a brief update and overview. Every first week of December, the City Council meets to set the tax rate and to propose our 2023 tax classification. It's an important meeting, 2022 tax classification. It's an important meeting because tonight I am again asking you to shift some of the tax burden away from residential homeowners and onto our commercial and industrial base. We are very fortunate to have a very strong commercial base here in Peabody, which allows us the opportunity to grant some relief to our homeowners. I'm not going to talk about the COVID-19 pandemic tonight. Certainly that has upended so many aspects of our lives and created great hardship for so many people in our community, our country, and around the world. But it's time to move forward, and I think we feel confident that better days ahead. And I believe that also extends to our city's current financial condition. First and foremost, I'm happy to report to Peabody residents that working together with the City Council, we have brought back all positions, services, and programs. I'm proud to say that our public safety workforce has been fully restored, bringing us back to our pre-COVID staffing numbers. Great news to report is that our residential values continue to increase at record numbers. This year, single-family homes are up 11.7%. Condominiums are up 7.4%. 2- and 3-family homes are up 9.7%. This is explosive growth and unprecedented in our city's history. In the past 5 years, our residential property values have increased 46%. Our average residential value this year is $527,200, which is the highest in Peabody history. Overall, total property values are $10.2 billion, far and away the highest in Peabody history. This is obviously great news about our residential values. Again, a lot of this growth is attributable to strong market conditions nationwide. However, without question, much of Peabody's success is directly attributable to the work we have done together to make Peabody an even more desirable place to live. Now on to the good news about commercial values. Despite the many challenges faced by our business community the past few years, I can report that our commercial values have increased this year 3.48%, which is significantly higher than our spring projections. We had growth in the warehouse sector as well as industrial, which is 7.9%, and manufacturing. This good news has allowed us to reduce the expected tax increase from $239, which we projected in the spring, to now $219, which is significantly lower than other Essex County communities. To put that into perspective, the average tax increase for the 33 cities and towns in Essex County is $330. Also contributing to the improvement is that our local receipts came in higher than expected, up over $500,000 above our spring projections. Because our local receipts, and those are meals tax, hotels tax, excise tax, because our local receipts are back to almost pre-COVID levels, I can report that our reserves have also rebounded to where we were in July of 2018, at just over $14 million. More good news to report is that our better than projected numbers allow us to reduce our reliance on ARPA funds. You may recall in the spring we mentioned that our plan going forward in terms of ARPA was we used $4.58 million to supplement our budget needs last year. This year we were projecting to use $3.5 million, and then the next year we would use $1.5 million to kind of wean us off the ARPA funding. We're coming forward to tonight to reduce that number from 3.5 to 2.5 million. It was a recommendation by Mike Gingras and our finance team to do that, and I fully support it. This allows greater flexibility for future financial needs. We could use the additional money for funding one-time infrastructure projects, thereby easing the burden on our debt service budget. We could use the money for budget needs next year, which, like every budget year, will have its challenges. I've shared what I hope you'll agree is an encouraging report on the state of our city's finances. And before I turn it over to Mike Gingras for his presentation, I want to take a minute to recognize the work we've done together the past few years. We have just lived through an historic period of uncertainty which affected all aspects of our lives, including our economic security. Working together with the City Council and our state legislative delegation, our finance team in Peabody and I are optimistic that we have not only weathered the storm, but that we have positioned ourselves for continued growth and prosperity and flexibility. Thank you. I'm here to answer any questions, certainly, but I'm going to turn it over to Mike to give the presentation, and I thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you, Mayor. Excuse me. Thank you, Mayor. We're going to begin by looking at the fiscal 2022 closeout. You can see at the top of the page we had sources of revenue from various sources: property taxes, local receipts, and the key thing here is the local receipts at $20.8 million, the third line down. That came in $2.9 million over budget from the prior year. All of that combined with the ARPA funding last year contributed to $172.6 million of revenue sources against our original budget of $160.2 million, some supplemental budget, North Shore, Essex Tech, county and state assessments, and our abatements for a total of $169.9 million. At the end of the day, we had revenues over expenses of $2.7 million that was added to our beginning fund balance of $12.1 million. And after reserve for encumbrances and the transfer we made to fund school lunch last year, we ended this year at $13.5 million. So that was a great increase over prior years and fighting through the COVID times. This next slide takes a look at the enterprise funds. Remember, we combined the skating rink and the golf course into the recreation enterprise fund, but I broke this out so that you can see the revenues for the skating rink were $739,000. The operational costs for the skating rink were $707,000, so the rink actually contributed $32,000 towards the debt service, but debt service was $92,000. I should have probably broken it on the screen. But there was, at the end of the day, a $60,000 shortfall when we went to try to pay the full amount of the debt service. And we had a small beginning balance of retained earnings, leaving us with $59,000 shortfall in the skating rink portion of the recreation enterprise. The golf course had another good year. I think $1.9 million in revenue is a new record. Expenses came in at $1.488 million, leaving us with a gross profit of $418,000. We had a beginning fund balance of $543,000. So at the end of 2022, the golf course had a retained earnings of $962,000. Since they're combined now in this one recreation enterprise, the recreation enterprise at the end of 2022 has a $903,227 retained earnings fund balance. The water and sewer fund is our other enterprise fund. We came in with 19.5 in revenue, a little over 19 million in expense, which produced a gross profit of $441,000. We had a beginning retained earnings of $1.2 million. Adding those together, we were certified by the Department of Revenue at $1.669 million. And tonight we're asking a late communication transfer of $100,322,100, which will reduce that number to $347,000 in order to fund this 2023 budget for water and sewer. This next slide is where we stand with ARPA as of June 30th. We were allocated little over $21 million. We received 100% of that money to date. We received that in 2 rounds of funding of $10.5 million. We spent through the first round of $10.5 million and $120,000 towards the second round. By June 30th, we had spent $10.6 million, leaving us with $10.4 million remaining. Tonight, we're asking to use $2.5 million, as the mayor alluded to, which would leave us $7.9 million going forward for the rest of this year and for the next future 2 budgets, because this funding will expire in December of 2025. It has to be committed, 24, it has to be committed by and spent by 2026. So that would take us through fiscal 2025. I also anticipate maybe some of this ARPA funding for some overtime shortfalls coming up with public safety. This is a look at our reserves from July of 2021. We originally, during fiscal 22, were certified at 8.7 million with 3.2 million in stabilization for a total of 11.9 million in reserves. Through the course of FY22, we used 2.9 million from free cash, leaving us at the end of 22 with 5.8 million in free cash and 3.3 million in stabilization for a total of 9.1 million. We recertified free cash for fiscal 23. The state takes a look at all of our sources of revenue, and like I said, our local receipts came in at 2.9 million higher. We were able to reduce some of the shortfalls that we had from the prior year, and through the calculation that the state makes, they added $5.8 million to our free cash, certifying it at 11.6 million. Tonight, we're going to ask to use 1 million of that, leaving 10.6 million, adding our stabilization fund of $3.3 million. That brings us to a little over $14 million, and as the mayor talked earlier, that is where we were in July of 2018. I anticipate there's going to be some needs against the free cash. We'll have snow and ice issues this year. We also have some labor contracts we have to deal with, and I anticipate kind of flipping. This year we're using $3.5 million from combination of ARPA and free cash. Similar plan next year, $3.5 million from ARPA and free cash, but more from free cash and less from ARPA. Projection here is to still have close to $10 million by the end of this time next year. Now we're going to get into our tax values and classification process. This year, the values increased by $897 million, or 9.6% overall. Huge increases, as the mayor talked about earlier. If we look at the history of our values, since 2018, residential has increased 46%. Commercial's only increased 4.8%. However, industrial has increased close to 40%, and personal property 30%. So really the huge lagging aspect of our values has been commercial. Overall, since 2018, the total values are up almost 39%. This next slide analyzes the residential values, and at the top of the page, single-family homes at 11.7%, condominiums at 7.4%, 2 and 3 families 9.7%, and multifamilies at 10.5%, for a total increase in residential values of almost 11%. And over the last 4 years, the assessors have noted that 469 single-family homes have sold for over $600,000. This next slide takes a look at our CIP values, and overall it's increased $58.3 million, or 3.48%. When we first came in budget time, I was being very conservative, and 1%, less than 1% was our projection, and happy to report that we did much better than projected. The main areas of improvement, increased rents and profitability, apartments, auto repair, warehouses, industrial, and manufacturing. This next slide kind of gives you a sense of what the trend has been over time in the proportion of commercial value to residential value. In the mid to late 90s, the top box, we were at about a 70-30% split, 70% residential, 30% commercial. Now in the later 2018 to current, we're in the 80-20 range. And right now, this year, we're at 83-17, and we're kind of approaching the 85-15. Over time, the values of residential properties certainly just hugely outpace commercial. The table below gives you a little bit of an example where in 2018, right below that, you can see where it says change 3.1 million, and CIP 844,000. So that year, the increase in the tax levy was 3.9 million, and the commercial industrial property was able to contribute 844,000 towards that increase. And then you see following that, all red numbers, because less and less of the tax increases has been able to be borne by the commercial and has fallen on the residential. This year, when we were projecting the tax implications at budget time, we had used 33 million as the amount that the commercial property would contribute towards the tax levy. And with the new valuations, that will become 34 million. So we pick up $1 million because of the increase in the values of commercial and industrial property. The average residential value this year, 527,200. Since 2018, that's a 46% increase. Unprecedented, but I guess what I want to say is I think 21% of that was, oh, I have another slide that I'll talk about that. So the next slide is commercial property. So on the one hand, residential property increased 46% since 2018. Commercials increased 11.3%. So that gap is what causes the residential taxpayers to have to bore more of the tax burden. This year, like I said, there was $52,200 increase in the average tax value for commercial property. Another piece of good news this year is our new growth continues to average over $1 million. This year, we're going to add 1.2 million of new tax dollars to the rolls, 960,000, 148,000 from commercial property, and 252,878 from residential property. That's 79% from commercial and 21% from residential. This next slide is our budget and gross amounts to be raised. The original budget, 168.6 million. Our supplemental salary amount of $1 million. The amount of Essex Tech of $4.8 million. State and county assessments at $4.2 million, and we bumped up. Normally, we've been using around $500,000 for allowance for abatements. We've bumped that up in anticipation of the increase in exemptions that is going to be before you tonight, and some probably more abatement requests coming in February. For a total of $179.4 million to be raised, and we're going to fund that through property tax, $115.2 million, local receipts of $19.7 million. The big increase is state aid. We went up $8 million to $40.8 million. A slight increase in the indirect costs provided by the enterprise fund, $2.5 million from ARPA, $1 million from free cash, and $12,000 from the parking meter account to balance the budget at $179.4 million. This next slide looks at our local receipts, and like we talked about, they've come back to almost pre-pandemic levels. We had a strong increase in motor vehicle excise, hotel, meals. Payment in lieu of taxes is up some because we've made some new agreements with some increased rates. The big one this year was licenses and permits. We brought in some significant building permits. One-time permit was $600,000. So I had to back off a little bit. And traditionally, if you look back at 2019, we were at about $2.7 million. So we're back on track there. In addition, Medicaid reimbursements, the school's been doing a really good job capturing those funds. So there's an increase there. And then we've reduced our ARPA dependency from 4.580 to 2.5 million. for a total of $22.2 million for local receipts. This slide looks at the state aid numbers. Again, the big increase was 34% for education aid at $32 million. We had an increase in our state and county charges from 3.1 to 3.7. So at the end of the day, our net increase goes from 29.1 million to 37.1. That's an $8 million increase, and that's 27% overall. This next slide is basically what we're here for, to classify the taxes. We're proposing 175% tax factor. And if you look at the first box, before classification, the values as they stand currently are 83% of the value, 8.5 million is residential, 1.7 billion or 16.9% is commercial. That would have produced a tax levy to residents of 95.7 million and 19.4 for commercial. With the 175 shift, the resident tax levy obligation goes from 95.7 to 81.1, moving it down from 83% to 70%, and it moves the commercial up from 19.4 million to 34.1 million. So that's a $14,624,000 shift from the residents down to the commercial, and it changes the split from 83-17 to 70-30. The benefit to the residents is a $907 lower tax bill. On average, the commercial industrial would increase $13,561. This next slide just shows the history of our tax rates, and as we've been talking about, the values have been quite high over the past number of years. So the tax rates work inversely. The higher the value of the tax, the lower the tax rate itself. As you can see, the line kind of dips from left to right. So we started off in 2018 with a residential rate of $11.46 and a commercial rate of $24.11. And this year we're proposing $9.52 and $19.67 for commercial. This slide looks at the average tax bill for the average residential tax bill. This will increase $219 or 4.5%. And I guess what I wanted to point out when I was on the other slide is since 2018, the average residential tax bill has increased 26%, or 21%, while the values have increased 46%. So with classification and using some sources of funds, we were able to mitigate that increase in values back to 21% from 46%. This slide, you can see that the commercial property just has not kept pace with the residential, and as you can see by the slide itself with the bar chart, it just continues to decline. This year, it's a $1,261 decrease on average. This set of tables looks at the different stratas of tax bills this year. 18.7% of residents will see a decrease. Last year it was 16.6. 45.1% will see an increase of $150 or less. That's a little bit less than last year. We were at 48.6%. And then this year on the commercial side, 64% will see a decrease, which is down from last year where they're picking up more of the tax burden. Last year it was 76% saw a decrease. This is the full chart of mostly 2022 single-family home values and tax increases for Essex County. There's 5 or 6 that had settled their 2023 tax rates. But at the end of the day, Peabody is still second from the bottom from Haverhill. With our last year, our average single-family home tax increase was $204. This year, it will be $259, and then the average residential value, which includes condos and two and three families, as well as single families, is the $219. The other thing I wanted to point out is the last column is excess levy capacity. That's the city's ability to continue to tax without a 2.5 override. We've grown from 18.6 million to this year it'll be 20.9 million. And over the course of, since I've been here 29, 30 years, we've, I think, saved the taxpayers about 120 million in amounts of money that wasn't taxed and is kept in levy reserve. The assessed values this year came in, to summarize, at 10.2 billion. We would be allowed to tax under Proposition 2.5, $136.1 million, but we're asking for an actual tax levy of $115 million. That's $20.9 million less. The classification factor is 1.75, and the tax rates end up being at $9.52 for residential and $19.67 for commercial.
Thank you, Mr. Gingras. Before we open it up to the council, we have allow the public, if there's anybody in the audience that wishes to discuss the tax classification. Is there anybody in the audience that wishes to speak about the tax classification? Seeing none. Do we have anybody on Zoom? We do have one person. Mr. Donovan, did you want to speak, or? Okay. If you could just give us your name and address for the record, please. Russ, if you could unmute.
Can you hear me now?
We got you now.
Russell Donovan, 12 Quail Road, South Peabody. I want to thank you for the presentation. I was looking over the numbers, and what I saw here is that property tax revenues are going to increase roughly $2.2 million over last year. It's on page 14, I believe. And in his presentation, the analysis of the values on page 10, it showed that about $3.5 million was coming from residential, and actually commercial was getting a $1.3 million tax decrease over last year. So again, commercials be paying less again, even with growth, they'll be paying less than they did last year. So $2 million increase in budget, all coming from the residential property owners. They're paying $3.5 million in increased taxes. Even with new growth in commercial, they're still getting a tax decrease overall.
Thank you, Mr. Devon. Did you have a I'm sorry, was there a question or?
No, it's a point that the mayor came out saying that in the beginning that the businesses were going to be paying more this year, but in fact, they're paying almost $1.5 million less than last year, even with new growth.
All right, thank you, Mr. Donovan. All right, now I'll open it up to the council. Councilor Turco.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Mr. Donovan. Mike and Mary, thank you again for an excellent presentation. I searched for questions, and I only have just a couple because you were pretty thorough with the report. My first question is regarding the decision with the ARPA funding to take the money from free cash rather than ARPA. What was the deciding factor? I don't disagree with the mayor's presentation as far as why you did that, but there's two sides to that. So what was the discussion as to why to take it from one and not the other?
For this year, we were always going to do $1 million in free cash. That hasn't changed. What changed was the amount of money from ARPA was reduced because we did have a greater contribution from the commercial than we anticipated. We were able to wean off of that sooner and use it for one-time charges as opposed to operations.
Right. Now, on the other side of that, Mayor, I understand your thought process of having that ARPA money available. You know, if we left it in free cash, wouldn't it help us with the tax classification, excuse me, the bond rating, to have that extra $1 million, and it would still be available to you with no time constraints such as the ARPA. The ARPA is 2025, as you said, but if we left the $1 million in free cash and you needed to ask the council for that $1 million for a project or for later revenues, I just believe, my belief is that we should kind of, from now till 2025, utilize that ARPA instead of free cash and keep the free cash high. I was extremely happy to see the number that it's at this year because I think, in the past, we had all had concerns about how low the reserves were getting. So at this point, I mean, that's an amazing number to look at. I almost would rather see it there, and I don't know if it's too late in the game to change that, but I kind of, and even if you'd be willing to, Mayor, but I just see you still have the same ability, if not more ability, to utilize that in the free cash and possibly help us with the bond rating in the future. And if we don't need it, it's just a financial stability for the city for the future. I'm more inclined to think the other way. So I guess I'm looking for you to convince me why, I shouldn't think that way, because I do agree with some of the things that you said up there. Long term, I just think to have that free cash, it's an exciting day to see that at one point we were up to 7 or 8 million, and we're at $14 million right now. That's I didn't think we'd see the day that we got that high again, and I kind of would like to keep it there. You have, as far as the ARPA, in 2022 when Mike presented the budget, we expected to have 6.7 million that was presented to us at the budget, but we have 7.9 today. That's part of that is the million that you're not taking out of the ARPA, but there was also $200,000 that you didn't wind up spending. So you still have a significant amount of money in there, even without going to free, if you take the $1 million out of this, is my point. I think, I'm not sure why, but the Aberdeen project is no longer listed under ARPA. I think that was probably a different funding mechanism that we wound up getting. Last year it was listed as $300,000 from ARPA.
Mr. Mayor.
Sorry, Council, just to jump in on that the Aberdeen, we used ARPA for the Granite Road, Mountain Terrace. We used MWRA. We had some MWRA funds that we used for Aberdeen. And I anticipate, well, anyway, I didn't want to cut you
Well, that
off.
answers my question. So there's three altogether. So Aberdeen was listed when you presented the budget to us as a $300,000 ARPA expense, which is no longer in there. So that's why, that saved you some money in the ARPA, which is great. Mountain Terrace went $45,000 over budget, I get that, and the police HVAC was $30,000 under budget. So, and I think there was an additional expenditure for overtime for police dispatchers that you added into ARPA that wasn't in the budget, in June. But long story short, out of that, you're still, even without the $1 million, $200,000 more than you anticipated you were going to have. So I'm just, again, it brings me back to the question is why we just don't continue to take this out of ARPA, leave the free cash where it is, leave our bond rating and the security of the city at its highest level in years, and it actually gives you the same freedom, Mayor. It gives you, the same abilities to build what you want to build and infrastructure projects that you need. It's just a discussion amongst the council at that point. I think with ARPA expenditures, you don't really need the council approval. I get that, but we're not going to refuse you to, for a project that needs to be done in the city. So I'm more like I'll let you answer. I'm going on, so I'll let you answer that.
No, those are fair points. So your thinking was rather than the proposal right now would be $8 million would remain in ARPA, and 14 would remain in free cash. You think that it would be to reduce the ARPA to $7 million, and then free cash would be at 15? Is that basically essentially? No,
yeah, that's exactly it. And I'll let Mike. It looks like Mike has thought this out thoroughly. So
You wouldn't be increasing free cash to 15 million. And the real point here is, if we have a $3.5 million plug with ARPA money, then next year we're looking for $3.5 million from someplace. Where does it come from? So now, if we only have a $2.5 million plug, we're able to handle how do we plug the $2.5 million instead of 3.5. So it's just an easier overall budgetary balancing when you wean off of those one-time funds. That's really the argument. Because I got a $3.5 million gap if we use $3.5 million, and we can't use $3.5 million for the next budget, and the next budget is going to be more challenging because we have a lot of labor costs that are going to come through. So that's why I recommended to kind of slide off of the ARPA on the revenue replacement and utilize ARPA for capital projects, one-time projects that we wouldn't have to fund through debt, but we could use that ARPA money instead, which would reduce our budget, our debt service budget in the long run. So, it's kind of a balancing act, but that was my proposal.
Right, and I agree with you about the challenges of next year. I mean, it was actually a question I was going to ask Susan after, as far as, I don't think that residential values will sustain at this level, so it's going to be an issue for us next year. But I'm hopeful that commercial values are on the way up, which is surprising to me. But it seems like they've rebounded quite nicely. But back to the ARPA money. So why couldn't we? If I understand what you're saying, you take it out of one pot for revenue replacement. But if next year we do need it, you're correct in your assumption that we might need another $3.5 million. Why couldn't we go to reserves then, or free cash at that point, if we needed it? We don't know that we're going to need it. I know that your job is to forecast this, and you're very good at it. But if things turn around greatly and we don't need to go to free cash next year, great. If we do, we do. Then it's no harm. And why wouldn't free cash increase $1 million this year if we're not going to take the $1 million out? I guess is my question.
It would. So, I think, I know Mr. Gingras feels pretty strongly on this. I'm going to support that and ask for, support from you for that. I anticipate that this coming year is going to be a significant year of projects in our city. And I think we'd be able to utilize the ARPA money for that, for those one-time costs. I know the one off the top of my head, I know we're going to do a big project over on Lowell Street, over near the West Peabody Fire Station. There's going to be significant road work done over there, like we did on Aberdeen. And we'd be able to use those costs and not add them to the debt service. By adding onto the debt service, it has a similar effect where it would hurt our potential bond rating. As we continue to add debt to our city, it just, that factors into our bond rating. So I felt that by doing it this way, where it gives us flexibility to do these one-time cost projects, and then also provides flexibility in terms of, I know a number of other cities and towns have used some ARPA funding for some social services and to assist different social organizations. So that might be something as well. To me, it's very similar. You could do it either way. I just think that this is the appropriate way to go based on the financial recommendation of Mr. Gingras. But it's money that's there for us to utilize. I just like the flexibility that the ARPA money creates as to where it goes, as where it can go.
Thank you both for the explanation. I just wanted to throw it out there as, you know, something to look at. It's just a different look at it. Just a couple more questions. Like on page 15, which is the projected local revenues, just a couple things. On last year's presentation, you had cable fees in the opioid settlement listed in this form, and this year they're not listed. Is that because they were directly allocated instead of, you know, being put as part of the general fund? Excuse me.
The cable fees now are in a separate fund. They don't go to the general fund. They go to receipts reserved for appropriation. We could come to you at some point in time to utilize some of those funds for any kind of a project. In the opioid funds, currently around $300,000 that we've received, and we're going to be coming to you with a request to appropriate those funds for particular purposes, and we're kind of gathering that information. But that's not part of the estimated receipts, but they're sort of isolated within the general fund in waiting for appropriation, and we'll be coming January, February with those.
Okay, and then just one more fund that I was looking at, and you touched on it, was licenses and permit fees, which is roughly, what, $600,000 less in this 2023 than 2022, and I understand you explained why that is. But don't we, Mayor, I guess this is for either one of you, don't we expect some of these 40Bs to be permitted? I think the only one that was permitted so far might have been Farm Ave, and we might have received funding for that. Am I wrong? I think they paid for their permit fees.
I don't know which ones. I know one came in at around $600,000 with all the fees associated with it. And since we're traditionally around $3 million, I didn't want to be too aggressive with this. And even at that, I think we're a little bit aggressive at 3.2.
I think the 600, Councilor, was the, what's that? Well, that was a fee, but I think the big one that Mike is concerned about relying on going forward was Dearborn Road. It was the old Joel property. I can't think of the Dearborn Heights. I can't think of next to Dearborn Heights, but it was the old Joel property. That was a $600,000 one. But yeah, we have gotten some money from some of the projects, Sonic, a couple of the others. And I anticipate probably next year there will be some that come into some of the other 40Bs. But those are hard to really say right now with because of appeals and some of those cases are tied up in litigation. So it's really hard to say exactly how that's going to play out.
Okay, I just thought, I think there's like Farm Ave, Endicott, King, Route 1. One of those will be a huge influx of permit fees and money to, you know, for the city. I hope, anyway. I'm trying to be optimistic here. That, and I think I just had one more question, if I can find it, but I may be done. You know what, I think that's it for now. If I have something else, I'll come back to it, but I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Gamache.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Follow up on Councilor Turco's comments. I believe that the way we're going with the ARPA funding is the right way to go, and the reason being is that ARPA specifically goes towards water, those types of projects. We have a very serious aging condition on all our infrastructure. I'd rather have that money available for future that's in the bank that won't hit our debt service, such as the project we're going to have on Lowell Street. I mean, you don't want to go out and bond for $1 million to do something that ARPA can pay for. And we also can hit, now that you've reduced that by $1 million this year, we've got 3.5 for next year, correct? ARPA funding, which would be available. Right.
So, yeah, we were thinking of 3.5, but instead 2.5. So instead of 7, we have 8 million.
8
now.
million
Yep.
next year, and I'm a, thank you, 7.9. I'm just, you know, we look at this stuff and where we're going to go next year and certain projects that may or may come to fruition. I firmly believe that $8 million in ARPA funding is available for 24, 25, and any other projects that may. We don't know what's going to happen. You know, it's money in the bank instead of using free cash or going and increasing our debt service. So I think that the reduction this year because of the revenue increase is the right way to go. And that's just my take on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Gamache. Council Welton.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Gingers, for the presentation. And congratulations. I know it's a lot of work to pull this together. I was particularly impressed when you had said that we've saved the city of Peabody over $120 million over the years, which is absolutely incredible. A number that jumped out to me that I just wanted to kind of bring up and get some clarification on is our excess levy capacity is 18.6 million, and that looks to be about of all of the excess levy for Essex County at 47.9 million, we comprise about 38% of that. Does that seem correct? I mean, it just seems like a huge amount compared to the rest of the communities.
It's actually higher. It's going to be 20.9. That was 18.6 was last year's number for 2022. So yeah, no, that is correct.
So roughly 40% of all excess levy for the entire Essex County is coming from the city of Peabody, which is pretty remarkable, pretty good bargain for our residents here. I don't know that is fully kind of understood from resident to resident in terms of a comparison. The question I wanted to pose probably to you, Mr. Mayor, is obviously I'm in favor of keeping the taxes as low as possible for our residents, but with a CIP factor of 175%, do you get a sense that we're not as competitive as some of our nearby neighbors that do rely on a lot of revenue coming in from the commercial industrial sector? And the reason I bring it up is, again, I'm not advocating that we increase residential taxes, but I think we should look at it. If you look at some of the other towns, Salem, Lynn, Saugus, Methuen, Haverhill, Beverly, Swampscott, Andover, they're all at 175 or thereabout. But it would be interesting to find out how some of these other cities that have, they're closer to 100, how they're faring in terms of attracting businesses. And particularly, I'm thinking we should spend some time looking at this because I would be a little cautious that we might be losing some of our large contributors in the future, moving to more competitive cities that have a lower CIP factor. So nothing that we're going to address tonight, but I just wanted to float it out there because I think that's a trend that we should probably pay attention to going forward. But again, congratulations on putting this together. It's really remarkable. Thank you.
Thank you, Council. And just on the excess levy capacity, it is something that we should be pretty proud of here in the city because for two reasons that I think that's a great number. One is it is something that Moody's looks at when they do our bond review. That's a big factor that allows us to keep a pretty strong bond rating, even though we put on a lot of debt over the last several years. But that excess levy capacity is taxable money that we could go after, and that our free cash commercial base, other things, other factors help us when we do our review. And then secondly, if we were to undertake a major construction project, like a new high school or, a large project of some, we have the financial ability to do that without going to a 2.5 override, which require a vote, which can be a little tricky depending on what the project is. So that's and it's difficult. The excess levy to capacity is a difficult concept to explain to people as to why that's a benefit to us, but it really is a great benefit to us, particularly on those two levels. But there's other reasons as well. Good questions on that. I know, 175 is the max we can put it at. That's where we're proposing tonight and asking for support on. I know a lot of our neighbors that are also like us that have a lot of business and commercial use in the city have similar numbers. But it would be interesting to see how it works in other communities. They're much smaller. They don't have nearly the commercial base that we do. But it would be interesting to see how that works, how that factors in. I always compare ourselves to, our neighbors here that have other businesses in the area or in their communities. So it's hard to really compare to a Wenham or a Hamilton or some of those communities that charge an even number. But it would be interesting to see how that works for them.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilor O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to add my voice to the chorus, thanking the mayor, Mike and Mary for the presentation. It's always, while it's tax classification, it's kind of daunting given, we now have to complete the process of we've done the budget. Now we have to kind of, shift the levy and talk the tax levy and get to the nuts and bolts. But I do always like the update on the city's finances, and things are looking good. And I do want to mention to thank Councilor Turco. I like the fact that he's bringing up a possible option just to talk about it. I will say I do agree that we should, to your point, Mr. Gingras, wean ourselves off ARPA for operational. The only question I have is just to kind of talk, one of the residents who called in, it was difficult at times to hear at the end. I think the general consensus that he was trying to get, or point was that he was saying that while commercial values are increasing, they weren't seeing the same increase. And I think it's important for people to understand, as I understand it, right now we are at the max percentage of being able to shift the tax levy to commercial. Is that so we can't increase it any further than we are doing right now by state law? Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure that that was out there, that we're not trying to give anyone a break more so and put the burden on the residents.
That's correct, Council. I just want to make sure he said yes, but I want to make sure it was heard on.
Okay, thank you. That's all I had. Wanted to make that point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor O'Neill. Any other councilors? Councilor Rosano, and then Councilor Turco.
Thank you, Mr. President. A lot of my questions have been already asked and answered. One of the questions that I raise annually is pay in lieu of taxes. I know we have a number of hospitals and businesses. Where are we with negotiating contracts with our pay in lieu of taxes? Are we up to date? I know there were a couple that we were in negotiations with. Is that still ongoing? And are we looking at trying to get more revenue from pay in lieu of taxes?
Thanks, Councilor. Yes, that's is pretty much a constant thing where we're negotiating. We're in a couple of negotiations now. I'd like to mention their names, but I probably would like to hold off for now. To try to get some support from them for their work. As people may know, anybody who's a nonprofit, hospitals, schools, they do not pay. They're not required under state law to pay taxes. So we try to work out agreements to have them contribute to infrastructure and other things in the form of a payment in lieu of taxes. We've been able to strike some deals with hospitals, been able to add to those over the years. Some medical providers that are profit organizations, we've been able to do that as well. And so that is something we're continuing to do. We've been able to add to it over the years. But it's something that, is a constant work in progress because there's no obligation for them to do so. It's what I try to propose is them to be part of our community and be good neighbors and contribute. So that is kind of a work in progress. And we are in active negotiations with two right now that I've been speaking with.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Rosendahl. Any other, Councilor Turco?
I appreciate you coming back to me. I thought about, I mentioned that I wanted to ask Ms. Antonellis some questions about the assessments, but I'd never called you up here, so thank you for coming up and thank you for coming back to me. So as I mentioned, you likely don't forecast that residential values are going to stay at this high of a level and possibly decrease for next year.
For next year, we expect another increase, because you have to understand, for fiscal '23, the values are based on calendar year 2021 data. So for fiscal '24, we'll be using calendar year 2022 data. When calendar year 2022, sales are still high. So we are expecting an increase on residential values for next fiscal year.
Thank you. That's good to know because I wasn't expecting it. But as far as commercial, I was pleasantly surprised to see any increase in the commercial values at all, with so many people still working at home. So what's the forecasted outlook for commercial?
Commercial, as you know, doesn't appreciate as much as the residential values, definitely lags behind, but they're starting to see better values. Rents are better. Vacancies are a little lower in some segments of the classes of property. Some segments are flat. Office is fairly flat. But as Mike had mentioned, industrial properties are renting incredibly high. Vacancy is at an all-time low. It's 100% occupied, I should say. So things are looking good in certain classes, and things are relatively stable in certain classes. So it's hard to predict. Hopefully things start to improve overall for commercial and industrial properties to see those values increase even more.
There you go. My last question is in regards to vacant properties.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned this to the former city solicitor, Mike Smezinski, a few years ago. A lot of cities and towns actually charge a higher rate assessment on vacant buildings and vacant property in an effort to get those people that are paying very minimal to have a vacant parcel or abandoned building in the city to actually move on it. They're actually increasing those values exponentially, or the rate. They have a third rate for those. Is that something that we could do? Because we do have some vacant parcels that I would love to see. Specifically, Centennial Office Park, the cancer center that was knocked down, that was once a building that we could tax a decent amount at, is now just a vacant piece of land, but that may sit there for 3 or 4 years. So in order to move combined properties feet a little bit to develop that and do something with it, as well as 143 Linfield Street, as well as the vacant lot on Lynn Street next to Rizzo's Roast Beef and several others throughout the city. Is it something that we could look at a third classification for those vacant lots? I've seen it done in a number of cities and towns. I never heard back from Mike as far as if we could and how it would be implemented.
Right. There is you could tax them as open space if they're listed as open space. We currently don't have anything that is classified as open space, which could require a different tax rate. But basically, we just need to value it at market value as a vacant, potentially buildable lot, for instance, or we don't charge more because it's empty.
Okay, I'll actually send you something, because there actually is something where they it was done in California to actually get these vacant buildings built out. It may have just been a fee charged by the city, separate from assessments. But I'll print it out. I had sent it to Mike, like I said, 3 years ago, and looking at these vacant parcels now, I just thought it might be something that we could kind of look into for the future. I actually think that Revere just did it a year or two ago.
Please, Council, send that. That'd be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. That's it.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Turco. Any other councilors? Councilor McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President. Under suspension of the rules, move to receive late communication 1.
You had the motion from Councilor McGinn. All in favor? Any opposed? The vote. Councilor McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President. Like everyone else, I'd like to thank the finance team for their hard work on this presentation. Very sound presentation, as always, and especially the attention on the fiscal 22 close and the ARPA funding summary. I think it's a good debate that we had about the $1 million difference on ARPA. Honestly, when I first saw that, and Mike, you know this, we talked about it a little bit. I was kind of more of the mindset of Councilor Turco, that maybe we don't do the $1 million transfer out of the reserves and use the ARPA money. I understand the pros and cons on this, and I've also been outspoken about in budget sessions the last couple cycles about not creating, a dependency on the ARPA money and a structural deficit by not weaning ourselves off. So the fact that we are weaning ourselves off, I don't want to sit here as a hypocrite and try to have it both ways. I know I can't have it both ways, but I guess the one remaining question I have is, if we're trying to figure out the best way to use this, if we had an extra $1 million, I mean, if you're looking at slide, page 5 slide about the reserve summary, I mean, if there was another $1 million on there, come time for the Moody's to take a look at this, I mean, I know it's hard for you to say what they would do, but I see you nodding, but I want you to actually say it into the microphone, because would it make a difference in the bond rating? Because if it would, we know we have a lot of capital coming down the line here, and if this was going to make an appreciable difference on the bond rating, then I think it would be something we'd want to be taking a hard look at. If it's not, then I think I accept kind of the argument for doing it the way you've put it before us.
I totally agree with you in terms of taking a look at this either way. $1 million is not going to make any difference on our bond rating. A community of our size that has a higher bond rating would have somewhere in the neighborhood of 22 or 23 million in reserve versus what we have. $1 million either way is not going to do it.
Right, and we're projecting another $2 million hit for the fiscal 24 rate, right? So,
possibly, yeah.
Possibly. But I mean, I know how you work, Mr. Gingras. You're prepping us here for what we're going to see next June, right? So, okay. Again, I think a good debate on this topic, and I'm inclined to go with this as it's been put before us, based on hearing the pros and cons. I guess the only other thing that I would comment on, which we really haven't, what hasn't really been discussed, well, you did make a reference to it, Mr. Gingras, when you talked about the change that you had in the allowance for abatements, was the adjustments that are going to be made for item C on the agenda, which is the increases to the Chapter 126 optional additional real estate exemptions. I think it's important that we point out, I think all councilors understand, but residents should understand that this is a process, continuation of a process that started really last year to increase these and expand these exemptions. It went up 10% last year, as I recall, and I think this is another 10% increase, so that's significant, and perhaps you could comment on that, Mr. Gingras.
Yes, that's correct. Last year we saw approximately 10% increase in values. Consequently, we increased the exemptions 10%. Similarly, this year, I anticipate we'll try to do it again for next year.
I don't have the kind of the decoder in front of me here, but could you just highlight a couple of what these clause references are? 17, 22, 22A, just so that folks know what,
Sure.
who these exemptions apply to.
Sure. There's various exemptions that are available for, Clause 17 is for a widow, widower, or someone over 70 with limited assets. Clause 22s are veterans with various service-connected disabilities. Clause 37 is for legally blind, and Clause 41 is for those over 65 with limited income and assets. And all that information is available on the city website on the assessor's page as far as the income and asset qualification amounts.
Great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
That's very helpful. Mr. President, I don't have any further comments, and unless you have others, Mr. President, I would move to close the public hearing.
You heard the motion from Councilor McGinn to close the public hearing. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote. Councilor McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would move to adopt Chapter 126 of the Acts of 1988, optional additional real estate exemptions for 2023, as specified in the communication from His Honor the Mayor dated November 21st, 2022. So moved.
You heard the motion from Councilor McGinn. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Councilors Gould.
Yes.
Rozignol.
Yes.
Peach.
Yes.
Welton.
Yes.
O'Neill.
Yes.
McGinn.
Yes.
Gamache.
Yes.
Turco.
Yes.
Daigle.
Yes.
Melville.
Yes.
Motion carries 10-0.
Councilor McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would move to approve the transfer request, unreserved fund balance, free cash, account number 100359001, in an amount of $1 million, to FY23 operating budget tax levy, account number 100392001, in an amount of $1 million. So moved.
You heard the motion from Councilor McGinn. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Councilors Gould. Rozignol.
Yes.
Peach.
Yes.
Welton.
Yes.
O'Neill.
Yes.
McGinn.
Yes.
Gamache. Turco.
Yes.
Daigle.
Yes.
Melville.
Yes.
Motion carries 10-0.
Councilor McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to approve transfer request, parking meter revenue, account number 2700000330001, amount of $12,000, to fiscal year 2023 budget, account number 1000000392001, an amount of $12,000. So moved.
You heard the motion. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote.
Councilors Gould.
Yes.
Rozignol.
Yes.
Peach.
Yes.
Welton.
Yes.
O'Neill.
Yes.
McGinn.
Yes.
Gamache.
Yes.
Turco.
Yes.
Daigle.
Yes.
Melville.
Yes.
Motion carries 10-0.
Councilor McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President. Move to approve the transfer request, water and sewer retained earnings, account number 4600000311101, in an amount of $1,322,100 to fiscal reserve for fiscal 2023 budget, account number 4600000311102, in an amount of $1,322,100. So moved.
You heard the motion from Councilor McGinn. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Councilors Gould. Rozignol.
Yes.
Peach. Welton. O'Neill.
Yes.
McGinn.
Yes.
Gamache.
Yes.
Turco.
Yes.
Daigle.
Yes.
Melville.
Yes.
Motion carries 10-0.
Councilor McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President. Move to adopt a residential factor of .847231 for fiscal 2023. That's a 175% CIP. So moved.
You heard the motion from Councilor McGinn. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Councilors Gould.
Yes.
Rozignol.
Yes.
Peach.
Yes.
Welton. O'Neill.
Yes.
McGinn.
Yes.
Gamache.
Yes.
Turco.
Yes.
Daigle. Melville.
Yes.
Motion carries 10-0.
Councilor McGinn.
Move not to grant a discount for open space. So moved.
You heard the motion from Councilor McGinn. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Councilor McGinn?
Yeah, on the motion, just to point out, this is a motion to not grant, so we're looking for a yes vote.
You heard the motion. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Councilors Gould.
Yes.
Rozignol.
Yes.
Peach.
Yes.
Welton.
Yes.
O'Neill.
Yes.
McGinn.
Yes.
Gamache.
Yes.
Turco.
Yes.
Daigle.
Yes.
Melville.
Yes.
Motion carries 10-0.
Councilor McGinn?
Thank you, Mr. President. Move to not adopt a residential exemption. So moved.
You heard the motion from Councilor McGinn. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Councilors Gould.
Yes.
Rozignol.
Yes.
Peach.
Yes.
Welton.
Yes.
O'Neill.
Yes.
McGinn.
Yes.
Gamache.
Yes.
Turco.
Yes.
Daigle.
Yes.
Melville.
Yes.
Motion carries 10-0.
And Councilor McGinn?
Thank you, Mr. President. Move to not adopt a small commercial exemption. So moved.
You heard the motion. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Councilors Gould.
Yes.
Rozignol.
Yes.
Peach.
Yes.
Welton.
Yes.
O'Neill.
Yes.
McGinn.
Yes.
Gamache.
Yes.
Turco.
Yes.
Daigle.
Yes.
Melville.
Yes.
Motion carries 10-0.
Councilor McGinn?
Thank you, Mr. President. That's the end of the statutorily required motions. I just want to remind all councilors they need to sign the classification tax allocation form. Hopefully we'll have that this evening. We have a number of other transfers that we're going to address this evening, Mr. President. And with that, I would like to ask Mr. Gingras if he would address item F on the agenda.
Yes, this is a request to approve the 10% CPC votes that we do every year, allocating funds from unreserved community preservation to historic preservation, community housing, and open space.
Thank you, Mr. Gingras. Any questions from any councilors? Seeing none, Councilor McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President. Move to approve transfer account number 270-0000333011, Community Preservation Fund unreserved, an amount of $381,223.77, to accounts number 270-0000333022, Historic Preservation Reserve Fund, an amount of $127,074.59, and account number 270-0000333023, Community Housing Reserve Fund, an amount of $127,074.59, and account number 270-0000333021, Open Space Reserve Fund, an amount of $127,074.59, and additionally approve a transfer from account number 270-0000333011, Community Preservation Fund unreserved, in an amount of $190,611.89 to account number 270-0000333021, Open Space Reserve Fund, in an amount of $127,074.59, and account number 270-0000333022, Historic Preservation Fund Reserve, an amount of $31,768.65, and account number 270-0000333023, Community Housing Reserve Fund, an amount of $31,768.65. So moved.
You heard the motion. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Councilors Gould.
Yes.
Rozignol.
Yes.
Peach.
Yes.
Welton.
Yes.
O'Neill. McGinn.
Yes.
Gamache.
Yes.
Turco.
Yes.
Daigle.
Yes.
Melville.
Yes.
Motion carries 10-0.
All right, moving on to item G.
This is a request to transfer $10,000 to cover the administrative costs of the CPC for FY 2023.
Questions from any councilors? Seeing none, Councilor McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President. Move to approve transfer request, account number 270-0000333011, Community Preservation Act unreserved fund balance, amount of $10,000, to account number 270-0000333024, Community Preservation Act administration, in an amount of $10,000. So moved, Mr. President.
You heard the motion. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Councilors Gould.
Yes.
Rozignol.
Yes.
Peach.
Yes.
Welton. O'Neill.
Yes.
McGinn.
Yes.
Gamache.
Yes.
Turco.
Yes.
Daigle. Melville.
Yes.
Motion carries 10-0.
All right, moving on to item H. Item H. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Council President. I just thought I'd mention this one. This is the Kristen Crowley Spur. I think all of you are familiar with this location. It's next to Speedway, in between In the Game and Speedway. It's a trail that runs from that very spot north all the way, I'm told, all the way up to potentially connecting up to Maine. Wells, Maine, a great city, Wells, Maine, I think. I think it's Wells, Maine. But this property, this trail has suffered serious drainage issues, really deteriorating the surface significantly. It's a dramatic drop-off from when you go into other towns and come into Peabody. We did get a $210,000 shared streets grant. When we bid it out, it came back a little higher, and we're just asking for that additional funding, that $25,000, to make this project a reality. This project would start in March. And I think it'll be a good project for us. So it's a great trail, but the Peabody location is definitely not up to where it should be.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Any questions from any councilors? Councilor Welton.
Just a point of clarification, it goes to Biddeford, Maine, which is a great city in southern Maine. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Welton. Seeing other councilors, Councilor McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you to Councilor Weldon, is there a motion about the greatness of Biddeford? Is this your hometown? I don't know. No. Mr. President, I would move to approve the transfer request account number 270-000-33015, receipts reserved for projects in amount of $25,000 to account number 250-000-35432-2020, Shared Streets Kristen Crowley Trail Project, amount of $25,000. So moved.
You heard the motion from Councilor McGinn. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Gould. Rozignol.
Yes.
Peach.
Yes.
Welton.
Yes.
O'Neill.
Yes.
McGinn.
Yes.
Gamache.
Yes.
Turco.
Yes.
Daigle. Melville.
Yes.
Motion carries 10-0.
All right, moving on to item I.
Thank you. This is a request to transfer $17,400 from historic preservation to continue the repairs of gravestones at the Old South Burial Grounds.
Thank you. Any discussion or questions? Seeing none, Councilor McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President. Move to approve transfer requests, account number 270-000-33022, CPC Historic Preservation, an amount of $17,400 to account number 270-1811-5856-3, 2023-0000000394, CPC Old South Burial Grounds Repair, an amount of $17,400. So moved, Mr. President.
You heard the motion. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Councilors Gould.
Yes.
Rozignol.
Yes.
Peach.
Yes.
Welton.
Yes.
O'Neill.
Yes.
McGinn.
Yes.
Gamache. Turco.
Yes.
Daigle. Melville.
Yes.
Motion carries 10-0.
Moving on to item J.
This next request is similar, historic preservation to Moulton Cemetery fence, $5,735 to replace the fence on the Moulton Family Cemetery on Route 1 South.
Any discussion or questions? Seeing none, Councilor McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President. Move to approve transfer request, account number 270-000-33022, CPC Historic Preservation, amount of $5,735 to account number 270-1811-5856-3, 2023 0000000507, CPC Moulton Cemetery Fence, an amount of $5,735. So moved.
You heard the motion. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Councilors Gould.
Yes.
Rozignol.
Yes.
Peach.
Yes.
Welton.
Yes.
O'Neill.
Yes.
McGinn.
Yes.
Gamache. Yes. Turco.
Yes.
Daigle.
Yes.
Melville.
Yes.
Motion carries 10-0.
Item K.
This is another request from Historic Preservation, $50,000 to add to the funding to repair the cupola and the Artworks Community Health Arts Center.
Councilor Welton.
Thank you, Mr. President. As an employee of Northeast Arc, I'm going to recuse myself for this vote.
Thank you, Councilor.
Mr.
Councilor
President,
Gould.
as a member of the Board of Directors, I'm recusing myself from this vote.
Thank you, Councilor. Any questions from any other councilors? Seeing none, Councilor McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President. Move to approve transfer request, account number 270-0000-33022, CPC Historic Preservation, amount of $50,000, to account number 270-1811-58563, 2023-0000000508, CPC Northeast Arc Cupola Repair, an amount of $50,000. So moved.
Hear the motion room. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Councilors Rossignol,
Yes.
Peach,
Yes.
O'Neill,
Yes.
McGinn,
Yes.
Gamache, Turco, Daigle, Melville.
Yes.
Motion carries 8-0.
Item L.
This is a request to transfer the third quarter Comcast receipts received to transfer the $208,539.65 to the PAT through the Cable Expense Fund.
Any questions from any other councilors? Seeing none, Councilor McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President. Move to approve transfer requests, receipts reserve cable fund, account number 270-0000-33017, amount of $208,539.65 to cable fund expense 270-0000-53007, amount of $208,539.65. So moved.
You heard the motion from Councilor McGinn. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Councilors Gould.
Yes.
Rossignol.
Yes.
Peach.
Yes.
Welton.
Yes.
O'Neill,
Yes.
McGinn,
Yes.
Gamache.
Yes.
Turco. Daigle.
Yes.
Melville.
Yes.
Motion carries 10-0.
Councilor McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President. Move to adjourn.
You heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? We are adjourned.
Thank you, Council.
Great job tonight.
Thank you.
Everybody comes up and signs the tax, yeah.